What's up, you guys? It's Avery and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who have never been here before, welcome. How you doing? Glad you're here. So I've mentioned recently that I just recently moved, and so I am back acquainted with my two giant shelves behind me, and they are both extremely unorganized and in serious need of, well, reorganization. I have a lot of books, and I actually know that I have not as many books as a lot of other people, especially here on BookTube, but I've decided to go through and purge some of these books because I really don't need a lot of them, especially because I just know that I'm never going to read them again, or I didn't even really like them in the first place, or I don't have any desire to read them. And so I am going to go through the stack. These are all the books that I'm going to get rid of, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I'm going to unhaul it. I think for some of these books I'm going to put them back into little free libraries and also maybe give some away to people who might want them. If there's a book that I mentioned that I've never read before and I'm like, I don't feel like reading it, but you've read it and you love it, let me know in the comments because I'm not going to get rid of them right away. So go ahead and let me know. That way I can maybe decide to save it. So we're just going to go through the stack and go ahead and get started. This thing is extremely unbalanced, so I have to like slowly take one from the top. The first book that I have is Matched by Ali Condi, and I read this book like in middle school. It has to be. I remember reading the entire series, but I don't really remember anything about it, and I just will never read it again. It's like a YA series and I'm good, you know? Plus, I know a lot of people like now hate the Match series, so maybe I'd be interested one day in rereading it, but as of right now, I'm just gonna get rid of it, especially because I don't have the other ones, and this is already like a really busted up copy. So next up we have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and this is a interesting science fiction book. I had to read this for a class like a year ago, and it was for a film class where we read a bunch of books and then watched the movies for them. Overall, like, I didn't hate this book or anything. I thought it was interesting, but I also thought parts of it were kind of boring. Also, there wasn't really like a plot, and like you have no idea what's going on really the whole time. And I've read synopsi of the rest of the trilogy, and I remember reading those and being like, okay, so we still don't know what's going on after 3 books. I thought it was an interesting read when I was reading it, but I don't really have any desire to like continue the series or to keep the hard copy. Next up we have Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven, and this is a book that my brother got me from the Dollar Tree. Love you, bro. He came into my room one day after he went to the Dollar Tree and he was like, I got you something, and it was this book. It was pretty much like an entire joke. I don't want you guys to think I'm just getting rid of this thing that my brother gave me, but it was pretty much just a joke, and he only bought it for $1. It's like a fantasy book, which is not my preferred genre. Love ya. Appreciate the thought. Next up we have Everland, and this is a Peter Pan retelling. I got this at like, I think, a Scholastic book fair a million years ago, and I just never ended up reading it. It's got a pretty cover, so love that. Next up I have The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. I read this in March of this year. I talked about it in my March wrap-up, I believe. I really liked the concept of this book because it is the story of a real woman named Belle DaCosta Green, and she was the personal librarian of J.P. Morgan, and she had like this really big role in curating J.P. Morgan's like library of like art and manuscripts and just a lot of really cool things. But she was also a black woman in the early 1900s passing for white. And so when I first heard about this, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds awesome. Sounds really cool and interesting. And I do think that her story is really interesting, but I just don't think that this book did a very good job of making it interesting. A lot of it was very repetitive, so I would definitely say like look her up and do some research about her, because I enjoyed reading about her after I read the book, but like the book itself isn't like the most interesting read, unfortunately. Next up we have The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And I read this in May of this year and I really liked it. It is like a really small book. I think I read it in like one sitting. And the only reason that I'm going to get rid of it is because I got this from a little free library, and whoever had it before me did a lot of like highlighting and writing, underlining in it. And so it was kind of distracting as I was reading the book. While I really enjoyed it, I don't think I want to keep this version that just has random highlights and underlines in it. So I'm just going to get rid of it because of that reason. But I really did enjoy that book a lot. Next up we have probably the greatest work of American literature, Doll House by the Kardashian sisters. I made a whole video about this book and how it's one of the worst things that my eyes have ever gazed upon. It was 1 star. It was really, really tragic. But I'm glad that I read it, and I'm glad that I had that formative experience. But I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. I'm going to let somebody else experience that. Next up we have A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. And I read this last year and I had heard really good things about it. This was like, I think, a pretty popular book on BookTube like years ago, kind of like when YA BookTube was more a thing, when like all of your favorite booktubers right now were like reading YA instead of more adult stuff. And I remember Emma Books specifically, who I love. She's like the first booktuber I ever started watching years ago, and she said that she loved this book. And so I was like, okay, when I saw it at a used bookstore, I was like, let me grab it. And I just did not love it. I didn't think that it was all that interesting, and it took a long time to get into like the actual meat of what was happening. And so I was kind of disappointed because I had heard such great things about it, you know? Next up we have another YA book. A lot of these books that I'm getting rid of are YA just because I enjoyed reading them when I was young, and I don't think I'm going to read them again. I am keeping a lot of YA too. You'll see in my bookshelf tour, but once I organize it all. Next up we have I See London, I See France by Sarah Mlynowski. This is like a contemporary YA romance about these 2 girls who go to Europe on a European tour during the summer, and they run into these 2 guys who they know and like hate. I think there's romance while they like jet around Europe. And so I think I enjoyed that aspect of it, like the jetting around Europe part, but it was just pretty like cringe. A lot of it was cheesy, that's the word. But I mean, it was fun but cheesy. So I'll never read it again, but I enjoyed it when I was a teen, you know? I was going to maybe get rid of this, Sea Fire by Natalie Parker, but I decided I'm going to keep it and read it because I remember my mom got this for me, and it's just been sitting on my shelf for a really long time, so I'm like, you know what, I probably am not going to get to it, but I just reread the synopsis and it seems interesting. So I think I'll keep it. Sisterhood is Survival. So I liked that. I think actually I'm going to keep that. It's just like a YA fantasy, so we'll see if I ever read it. I don't know. Next up we have The Unexpected Everything by Morgan Matson. And this is the thickest YA contemporary book that I've ever seen. It's like 500 pages. And I got this in high school when one of my classes did a book exchange. And the girl that gave this to me, I was actually very excited for her to give it to me because like we talked about books in the past, and so I was like, yay, someone with taste got me, so now she'll get me something good. And I remember starting and reading it and just being like so incredibly bored. It's about this girl who starts walking dogs during the summer, and she meets this boy and love. But I got like maybe 100 pages in and like literally nothing had happened. She was just walking dogs and like barely knew this guy. So I'm good. I'm not gonna ever pick it up again. I DNF'd it and I will never F it. Next up we have The Monstrumologist by Rick Yancey. I don't even remember where I got this. I definitely didn't buy it, I don't think. But it's about this boy who is an apprentice of a doctor of monstrumology. So he's a doctor of like monsters, and he meets this girl who is like half monster, half real life, and I think I started it a long time ago and it just like wasn't my type of book. I'm going to be getting rid of that, but I did enjoy the Fifth Wave trilogy by Rick Yancey, so no hate for him. Next up I have Playing Dead by Julia Heberlin. I don't remember where this came from, but it's about a girl who finds out when she's 30 years old that she was kidnapped as a child, and she has to like look into her past and figure out like where she came from. And I mean, that sounds like a cool concept, but it's been sitting on my shelf for years and I've never read it. I just don't think I'm ever going to, so I'm gonna get rid of it, but I mean, it still sounds cool. It might look like we're nearing the bottom of the stack to you, but 'tis not true. This is like halfway through, so keep it moving. Next up I have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This was also a book that was really popular years ago. I think I liked it when I read it, but now when I think back on it, like, Kath was like the most annoying character of all time, and she was just kind of like, this book is just kind of like problematic and weird, and I think most people would agree with that if you like read it recently, even though I haven't read it recently, but I'm never gonna read it again. The next book is Evermore by Alison Noel, and this is a book that I read a long time ago. I know it's like a whole series, and I never read any of the other ones. It's about, I think, vampires. It's just another YA book that I'm gonna get rid of. A lot of YA, I told you, there's a lot of YA here. Next up, we have Silent Harmony by Michelle Scott, and this is a book from the Fairmont Riding Academy. This is a book about a girl who goes to this private equestrian academy, and she gets this horse who used to be the horse of a woman who died, and everyone says it was an accident, but this girl, Vivian, is starting to think maybe it wasn't an accident, and honestly, I can't tell you if this is true or not, but I think the horse might talk to her. That might be a lie. I really might have just made that up. I liked it when I read it. I was a horse girl. I have a little horse right here on my bookshelf. Little wooden figurine. I still am a horse girl probably if we're gonna get real here. Prep school book vibes where there's mean girls and then there's cute guys and you know, all that jazz. Next up we have Our Chemical Hearts by Crystal Sutherland. This is just a book I read in high school, I think, and it's a romance. Yeah, it's just like a YA contemporary romance. They made a TV show about it, and I didn't watch it. Next up we have 1984 by George Orwell. I started reading this like a year and a half ago. I only got maybe 40 pages in and I just could not continue. I was so uninterested, which I know is crazy, but I'm sorry. I just was not interested. So I'm gonna get rid of it just because I don't think I'll ever pick it up again unless I'm forced to. Okay, next we have Wonder by R.J. Palacio. I had to read this in middle school. It's a great book. It has such a good like message, and it's really like a good one. So I think someone else will get more enjoyment out of it than I currently am. Delirium by Lauren Oliver, and I think this is also one that like during the like beginning days of booktube where like YA was like just really what all that booktube was, this one was like super popular. I never ended up reading it, and I mean it sounds interesting still when I read the back, and it sounds like something I would have liked when I was in middle or high school. But I just don't think that I'm gonna read it now. It's about a society where love has been declared a disease, so you have to be cured of love when you reach a certain age. And this girl is about to be cured, but she meets this guy who lives outside of the government's radar, and like, oh my gosh, what if they fall in love? Love isn't bad, guys. We have A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Crazy. You might be like, whoa, you're getting rid of that? For why? I read this book in high school, liked it, like I think I remember enjoying it, but that was years ago, and I don't think I'm ever going to continue the series, especially because I just see like so many funny videos about people reading the recent books from this series and how they're just like bad. Like A Court of Silver Flames I think is the recent one, and like so many people just think that they're like so cringeworthy, and so I just don't think I'm going to continue the series because also, like I said, fantasy is not my biggest thing that I like. But my mom really likes fantasy, and so I might let her look through some of these books to see if she wants any of them. Okay, we have made it to the last 3 books. It's a series, so I'm just going to talk about them together. And I feel like this is really, you know, how I know that I've grown as a person is that I'm getting rid of these books. And it is the Divergent trilogy. Oh my gosh, how could I? How could I? I was talking to my mom about this, and I was like, why would I keep these books when the last one was so horrible? Like, the first book was so good, really just like groundbreaking YA dystopian book, you know? And then Insurgent was good, but then Allegiant just kind of killed the entire series. I think most people would agree. And so it's kind of like I'm never going to reread them. And I just don't think that I'll want to keep them, like, to loan out or to have for my future children, because it's like, there's no point. There's other better YA dystopian series that you can read that have a better ending. So that is it for my unhaul. That was my big stack of books that I'm going to be getting rid of. I hope that you guys enjoyed seeing this. Now that I've unhauled a bunch of books on my shelves, as you can see, my shelves are chaos right now. I am going to be organizing and hopefully putting up a bookshelf tour soon. If you've read any of these books, leave a comment down below and tell me if you liked them, if you disagree with me, if you think that I should desperately hold on to them, because I might, okay? If someone is adamant enough in the comments, I might do it. I might keep it. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me in the future. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.